Hi, I'm Tamara from mooglyblog.com, and I want to welcome you to the Yarnspirations YouTube page. We're doing something new today. We're trying a live 1-hour class, and this class is centered around the Red Heart Come On Get Scrappy campaign, which is starting tomorrow. I get to share some insider information. But before we get started, since we are live, I'm just going to take a moment here and refresh my laptop in front of me so that I can answer any of your questions live. And, just follow along and make sure we're not missing anything. So just takes a moment here to refresh on the page a couple times. And I'm not seeing it. So there may be a little snafu there. Not sure why it's not showing up on my end, but we'll just go ahead and keep on going. So, as I said, my name is Tamara Kelly. I'm from mooglyblog.com, and you're watching me on, hopefully, the Yarnspirations YouTube channel. We are talking about Red Heart Come On Get Scrappy. This is a brand new thing. Red Heart is starting tomorrow, so you get a little sneak peek of it today. And I took a couple notes, so bear with me here while I check my notes. Basically, we want to repurpose our scraps and make some fabulous projects. So today, we are looking at the Red Heart Piece of My Heart crochet blanket right here, which is a perfect pattern for that. You can see I've got one square made right here already. So today we're going to be demonstrating that. But the idea is this blanket, if you make it in the size in the pattern, takes 120 squares. That can be really intimidating. But if you make 10 squares a month, next year you'll have a brand new blanket to put together just in time for Valentine's Day. So you can also mix and match your scraps for this one. The pattern is made with Red Heart Super Saver. Yes, Red Heart Super Saver, double check in there, which is a fantastic yarn, tons of colors. Lots of us probably have it in our stash. And with this pattern, excuse me, you can take all those little leftover bits and put them together into some fabulous projects. And of course, you don't have to use all the same 2 colors called for in the pattern. You can use whichever colors you desire. Excuse me. I'm just going to double check and make sure, since it's still not showing up on my end. Are we live? Okay, Okay, it says we're live, so we're just going to go ahead and keep going. Definitely, if you are watching us live, be sure to give a thumbs up. Let us know where you're watching from and what projects you're working on right now. So, okay, figured out what's happening. Apparently, there was a little checkbox that should have us showing up now, guys. Thank you for your patience again. As I said, this is the first live I think we've done on this, first live we've ever done on this page altogether. And I think it's the first live they've had on this channel for a little while. So we just, figuring out all those little things in the meantime. So I see it, it's up, we're good. All right, like I say, please do hit that thumbs up. Let your inspirations know you're watching. Let us know where you're tuning in from and how everything's going. Okay, now we can go ahead and get started. So today, the Red Heart Piece of My Heart crochet blanket. Let's go ahead and switch over to that hand camera and talk about this beautiful pattern. All right, here we have it. This is a printout of the free PDF that you'll find on yarnspirations.com. It's also linked in the description. And you can see lots of little squares right here. Well, not too little. About, I think, each square it says is approximately 5.5 inches square. So you can see here they work them all up in the same color, but if you're making a scrap-ghan, don't be afraid to mix it up. These are 2 colors of Red Heart Super Saver I had in my stash, and I chose to use these because I think it'll show up a little better here on the white table for demoing than a white would. Now, there's a couple things I want to point out in the pattern. It's always important to read your notes to begin with, and this pattern has not only written instructions, but it also has a really handy symbol chart for those who prefer those. However, what I really want to point out is this big long paragraph right here. I think anybody who's been crocheting for a while, even as designer, I know I hate it when I hit that big long paragraph, right? When we're glancing back and forth from our work to the instructions back and forth, it's so easy for your eyes to land in the wrong spot and to mess up the pattern. So what I did last night when I was working up my sample square is I went ahead and underlined all the sections where we changed color, just when we changed that color to our contrast color. We've got our main color, MC, and our contrast color, color A. So in some patterns, that might be A and B, but we just think of it as our main color is the heart, and the contrast is the surrounding. So in the instructions, I took the time to underline anything that would be the white or the green in this case right here with a pen. And this made it a lot easier for me, for my eyes to jump back and forth as I went, because otherwise it's very easy, as I say, just to get a little bit lost in there. Otherwise, some people like to just take a piece of paper and go down each row as you go. That's another great solution. But I just wanted to show you my solution while I was working up my square last night. So with all that said, let's go ahead and get started on our pattern. As I mentioned, we're using Red Heart Super Saver. This pattern calls for, where'd it go there? A 4.5 millimeter crochet hook. I know I'm a little bit of a tight crocheter, and I know what my tension works well with Super Saver, so I have bumped up to a 5 millimeter. With a pattern like this, you can definitely use whatever hook gives you the fabric you like with the yarn you're using. Like I say, I know a 5 millimeter gives me this really nice fabric with Red Heart Super Saver, so whatever hook works best for you. This is such a popular yarn. I'm sure you probably know what size hook you like to make with it already. So I'm just going to go ahead and pull up some of my yarn here. Love Red Heart Super Saver's center pull. And then I will just move this a little bit out of the way here so we can see what we're doing. Getting my instructions all uncovered for myself there. All right, so to make our square, all the squares are going to be the same. We're going to start with a chain of 4. So I'm going to go ahead and put a slip knot on my hook. There we are. And then we start with our chain of 4. 1, 2, 3, and 4. Then we're going to join with a slip stitch to that very first chain. There we are, to form a ring, just like that. Alrighty, pull that through and pull that on through for a slip stitch. It's kind of hard to see there when you're doing it, but now, hopefully if I move that tail out of the way, you can see there's a little ring right there that we can crochet into. Now the first 2 rounds of this pattern, if we come back here and look, you can see it's a granny square, and the first 2 rounds are a pretty standard granny square. That said, of course, there's a few different ways that people like to start and end their granny square rounds, so let's go ahead and make these first couple rounds here together. What we're going to do for our first round is chain 6. 1, 2, 3, and that third chain will count as the top of our first double crochet. 4, 5, and 6. And those last 3 will just count as a chain 3. Then we're going to work the same, the same repeat of stitches 3 times into the ring. 3 double crochets, chain 3. So we're going to do that combo 3 times. Let's do that now. We yarn over, go right into the center of that ring. And you can crochet over that tail if you want to, but you don't have to. I'm just going to go right in there. You can see I pulled up that loop from the ring. A little easier to see now. And where's 1 and 2 and 3. There we go. So there's 3 double crochets right into that ring, and then we chain 3. 1, 2, 3. So that was the first time. We'll do it twice more. 3 double crochets into the ring. I like to crochet over the tail. It's not quite as good as weaving it in. You'll still want to weave in the little end at the end. But, you know, there's no reason to not to start, if you will, burying that end a little bit. 3 double crochets. There we go. You can see our granny square here is coming together. Chain 3. And then one more time, 3 double crochets back into that ring. You can see that ring's kind of opening up and held open really nicely with all these stitches. So there's 2 and 3. Chain 3 one more time here. 1, 2, 3. So that's what we've got so far. After we finish those 3 repeats of the section in the parentheses, then we go back to our pattern, and it says to work 2 double crochets into the ring. And if you find, like me, that your ring is getting kind of a little full right here, don't be afraid to give it a little tug. This yarn is nice and strong. You can just give it a little tug, make yourself a little bit more room there. So let's put those 2 more double crochets right into that ring. 1 and 2. And then finally, we're going to join with a slip stitch in that third chain of the chain 6. So if you need to recount them from the beginning, you can. 1, 2, 3. find that third chain, and make our slip stitch right there. You can also put a stitch marker in that chain 3 as we begin each round if you want to. It's up to you. Some people like to use stitch markers in these. Some people prefer to just recount each time. But this is what it should look like at the end of round 1. Pretty standard granny square right there. So now we've got to make round 2. Again, standard granny square stuff. We're going to slip stitch into that chain 3 corner. There we go. And then we start again with a chain 6. 1, 2, 3. We know that third chain is going to count as the top of our double crochet. So 1, 2, 3 more. Then we work 3 double crochets in that same chain 3 space. So there's 1, right in that chain 3 there at the corner. 2. The yarn keeps trying to come up a little too fast. It wants to join the party. There's 2. There's our third one. And then what we're going to do, so if you haven't made a granny square before, this is a good idea of how a granny square works. We chain 1, we skip these 3 double crochets, and we come right here to this next corner. 3 more double crochets. 1, 2, 3. Oop, there we go. Chain 3 again. 1, 2, 3. And then 3 double crochets in that same chain 3. That's how we make our corners in our granny square. So now, flip a little bit more yarn here. You want to try and keep the tension on the yarn with your fingers, not with what's coming out of the skein. You want to have it pulled up from the skein a little bit. So otherwise that will cause your tension to tighten up on those stitches where you're pulling hard and loosen up on the stitches where you're not. So you want to just keep it even. So you can see now we've got one side of that granny square made. We've started the second side. We've come to a group of 3 double crochets. So we chain 1, skip them, and go to the next corner. Same thing, 3 double crochets, chain 3, and 3 double crochets into the corner. So if you were making a standard granny square without all these cool color changes that we're going to do to make the heart, you could just keep kind of working in this style in every round or row. Whenever you come to a group of 3, you would chain 1 and skip over it. If you've got a chain 1, you would put 3 double crochets right in there. And then if the corners are always 3 double crochets, chain 3, 3 double crochets. That said, there's always little variations out there that you'll find when you follow other patterns. Some people might only chain 2 at the corners, some people skip the chain 1, but overall, this is the basic idea. We've got our next corner made. We come to another group of 3, so we chain 1 and skip it. Puts us right back in the corner. For 3 double crochets, chain 3, and 3 double crochets. Hi everybody, thanks to everybody who's tuning in live. Really grateful for you joining us today. Hope you're having a wonderful day. If you're just joining us, excuse me, I am making the Red Heart Piece of My Heart crochet blanket. We had a little bit of a rough start today. There was a little check mark on the video that was keeping it from going out live to everybody who didn't already have the link, so I apologize for that, but it will be up permanently here on the YouTube channel, so you can go back and watch at your leisure as well. There we go. So we've got that next corner, 3 double crochets, chain 3, 3 double crochets. You can see we're on our last side here, looking nice and square. So we want to chain 1 and skip those last 3. Brings us to that final corner again. So we want to put 2 double crochets in there. So there's 1 and 2. There we go. And then we're going to join again with a slip stitch. Let me double check. Yes, join with a slip stitch in that third chain. There we go. I saw someone comment about this looks like the granny squares you'd see in TV shows. Absolutely. Anytime you watch a TV show, you know they want to make it feel like home. They put a granny square blanket somewhere in the scene. It's on the back of a couch or a comfy chair, a love seat, whatever. These are the granny squares you would indeed see in those blankets. These have been around for, I don't know how long. That's actually a great question. I don't know how long the granny square has been out there, but it is certainly a classic. Excuse me. All right. So we've got these first 2 rounds down. You can see nice and square. Round 3 is where we've got those color changes. So again, you can see right here, I have underlined anytime we change to color A. I have those sections underlined so that when I glance, excuse me, my voice has decided to try and go away. When I glance back and forth between my work and my instructions, it makes it a lot easier not to lose track. So if you don't have it underlined, you might want to use a piece of paper to just help you follow along. Alternatively, we've got the picture here, and those color changes are also, I should point out, indicated in the chart. So if you prefer to follow the charted instructions, the color changes are shown there too. The main color is red and the contrast color in blue. But we're going to try and follow along with these written instructions here. So we begin. We have our main color here on our hook. We're going to start the same way. We slip stitch into that chain 3 corner. Let me get myself centered there. I was too busy looking at the instructions. There we go. So we've slip stitched into that first corner. And then we are going to chain. This is going to be a little different. We're not going to start with a chain 6 now. We're going to start with a chain 3. 1, 2, 3. And that third one will be the top of a double crochet. So I like to pull that one open just a little bit more because I know I'm going to have to slip stitch into there. Then we work, let's see, I just want to make sure I absolutely get this right. 2 more double crochets, 1 and 2 into that corner. We're not sort of making our half corner. We're going right into the sort of that full corner. 3 double crochets, chain 3, 3 double crochets. That first chain 3 counted as our first double crochet. Hi, everybody. Thank you again for joining us. All right, there we go. So our first corner is finished for round 3. So far, very similar. Started a little differently with sort of our full corner, if you will, rather than that chain 6. But now we go back to our instructions. And now we are to chain 1 and work 3 double crochets in the next chain 1 space. But here's where we've got that little highlight, changing to A in that last double crochet. So let's go ahead and try and keep that in mind here. We chain 1, we skip that group of 3, work 3 double crochets into that chain 1 space. So we don't need to try and work into that chain 1 itself. We want to go right into the space underneath it for 1, 2, and then we've got our third one, but this is where we're going to change colors. So I'm starting my third double crochet here. I'm going to yarn over and pull through those first 2 loops. And normally I would yarn over and pull through these 2 to finish the stitch. But instead, here's where I'm going to put it down and grab, I keep grabbing these upside down. Here we are. Grab my contrast color. So this would be contrast A in the written pattern. Again, whatever color you want to use. I have a white, but I figured the green would show up a whole lot better here on our white background. So I'm going to pull up some yardage here so that I can keep the tension in my hands and not in the skein. And I somehow managed to tie a little knot in the end, but that's okay. We'll take care of that when we go to weave in our ends. All right, so to change our colors, we've got our yarn over here. We just take our new yarn, whatever color you want to use for contrast A, we can lay it right over our hook and pull through those last 2 loops. Now, excuse me, this gives us a really nice clean, this stitch is all the same color. And now the top of the next stitch will be our new color because that is the color of the loop on our hook. Now you've got a couple of decisions, well, really one big decision you need to make right here. Every time we change color, the pattern doesn't really indicate what we're supposed to do. It gives us the choice. It's your choice as the crocheter. Are you going to cut the yarn and rejoin it every time we have a color change? That's going to give you the cleanest color changes. It's going to give you the sharpest color changes. You're not going to have any weird bleed through from trying to carry the yarn around. That is one way to do it. Alternatively, you can try and carry that yarn with you. That's what I did. I'm not a huge fan of having extra ends to weave in, so I did try and carry the yarn with me. This is the back of my square. As much as I tried to hide it from the front, it still peeks out in a few places in the back. So this is what it looks like from the front when I carried that yarn. And if you look very closely, there are a couple places where you can see where I've carried that other color along with me. So you have to make the decision for yourself as the crocheter if you want to go ahead and just cut that yarn every time we've got a color change, or do you want to try and carry it with you and save yourself a few ends to weave in? Personal choice. I'm going to try and carry them along, and I'll try and share a couple of tips for that. But again, if it's really important you have to really sharp, crisp color changes, then you're going to want to cut the yarn every time. So let me get my hands sort of straightened back out here. There we go. And now we need to come back to our instructions. And I've got this section underlined, which is really handy because I know that I'm in this new color of yarn. So we've changed, and now we want to chain 1 and work our new color in the next chain 3 space. So we chain 1 with our new color, and then we're going to crochet over here. So to move our yellow yarn around with us, because we're going to want to pick it back up around here, I believe, it's already at the bottom of our stitches. So I'm just going to lay it right along the top of the previous stitches and crochet over it as I work into this corner right here. This is probably one of the easier moves right here. So there's 1, same corner as before, 3 double crochets, chain 3, 3 double crochets. We're still in this round working in the granny stitch pattern. We're just changing colors a lot. So there's our 3 double crochets. You can see that yarn is just riding right along the top of those stitches, so that's easy enough. And we'll leave this end. This end will get woven in when we're all done. So we chain 3 and put our 3 double crochets right back into that corner. There's 1 and 2 and 3. And with each of these stitches, I'm holding that other color along the back or on top so that I just want to make sure I capture it in each one of those stitches. Alrighty, so we've made our corner, so we come back to our instructions. I've underlined it right here. This is my first color change to the green, so I know that's my, luckily I had a green pen, very handy. So we've worked that 3 double crochets, chain 3, 3 double crochets in that next chain 3 space. Now it says with main color, chain 1 to change color, then with that main color, work 3 double crochets in the next chain 1 space, changing to A in the last double crochet. That's a lot, but we're going to take it one step at a time together. So what we need to do next is chain 1 with our new color to change colors. But if we do that just like this and just pull it up and chain 1, you can see that leaves that whole thread just kind of hanging out there on the side, not very well hidden. So let's go back a step. We're going to pull out that last double crochet we made in that corner right there. There we go. When we make this double crochet, I'm going to yarn over and go into that stitch and pull up my loop, just as I did before. But now I've got my yellow. I'm going to kind of put it up in the stitch, if you will. Put it up in here. So I'm going to yarn over. Let's do it this way. We'll yarn over and pull through the first 2. And then I'm just going to flip it over the green. So I've got my double crochet halfway made, but now I'm going to flip the yellow up over the green. Just twist it up in there. Then I'll yarn over with my green and finish the stitch. And now, it's kind of, let me turn this around here so it's a little easier to see. Now you can see it's showing. There it is in the back, like I warned you it would. But in the front, it's a lot more hidden. We can even give that a little tug and pull up any ease in there and make it nice and smooth. Now it's in the right spot. I'm going to go ahead and lay this green over the yellow one more time and do that chain 1 like so. Now I'm going to keep bringing this yarn with me, the green yarn with me, and particularly in the chain 1 here, it might look a little bit messy. I noticed that too, but keep in mind, we're going to come back and crochet into that chain 1 space, so that will cover up that little bit of a sin there, that little bit of color peeking through. So now we want to, with our main color, work 3 double crochets right into that next chain 1 space. So we want to go ahead and sort of bring that green down with us and crochet over it as best we can. It's not hiding it very well there, so let's think of a new plan. If we wind it up around our color again and trap it sort of in that stitch, then as we come down and crochet over it, it disappears a little bit more. It's sort of trapped behind the stitches. You can see how that's sort of happening back here. So then we've got 2 more double crochets to put in here. 1 and 2. But if I recall correctly, we're supposed to switch back to that other color on that last stitch. So let's double check our instructions. So we were with the main color, so we know that's a non-underlined portion. We chained 1. We worked 3 double crochets in the next chain 1 space, changing to A in that last double crochet. So now we once again want to pull up that other color. Oops, yarned over with the wrong one. I'm going to pull up that other color and finish our stitch with that new color. There we are. Like I say, it doesn't hide the color perfectly, but otherwise you can cut your yarn and rejoin by just laying it over our hook like we did when we brought in that new color instead. It's up to you. How many ends do you want to deal with at the end? Excuse me. So, as you're doing this, with all these flipping these yarns around, you may find what we see right here. The yarns are getting a little tangled up. So, it's a good idea every once in a while, as you're making this round, to take your time and just spin them one over the other again and get most of that out. We haven't gotten all the untwists out, but we've got enough that it won't be a problem, so we can continue. So we have our contrast color, color A, on our hook here. And with A, we're going to chain 1 and work our corner again. So we need to chain 1 because we're going to skip over this group of 3 and then work that corner again. But again, we need to bring that yellow yarn with us. But it's already at the bottom. This one's nicely at the bottom, right there. It's really just a matter of kind of feeling your way around, trying new things. If you don't like the way it looks after a stitch, try a different way. Try winding it up in the stitch. Try kind of including it in a chain 1. Hiding the ends, it's kind of an art. It's kind of like being a little sneaky spy. You kind of have to do it on the fly. And with each, with each stitch, kind of find the best way to hide it where it's going to be out of the way. So we've got our 3 double crochets, chain 3, 3 double crochets, making that corner. There we are, 1 and 2 and 3. There we go. And now, now we need to check our instructions here. We're working with our contrast colors, so we know we're in an underlined section. Very handy. It's our second contrast color section, so we know it's the second underlined section. And we're right at the end of it. We did our 3 double crochets, chain 3, 3 double crochets in that chain 3 space corner. So now we're going to go back to our main color and chain 1. And then it says work a 3 double crochets in the next chain 1 space. And then chain 1. And then work another corner. So we're going to do this whole side. I'm just double checking, make sure I understood that correctly. Looks like we do. Sounds like we do that whole side in this color, but I want to make sure that I got that correct. So after our second section, and this is why we underline it, just to be absolutely sure. I'm going to take this one step at a time here. With our main color, we're going to chain 1, so we can bring that up in chain 1. Again, that's a little too obvious for me, so I'm going to pull out that last double crochet and hide that a little bit better. Let me get the paper out of the way here so it's a little easier to say. I'm going to yarn 1 and go into that space and pull up my loop, and then I'm going to start sort of laying that yellow back over that green a little bit. Pull through, lay that yellow up over that green again, yarn over and pull through, and then give that yellow, my fingers out of the way there, give that yellow a little bit of a tug, and now it's mostly pretty well hidden behind there. And that's brought the yarn up to the top of the stitch, so now I can drop that green and yarn over with the yellow, the main color, to make that chain 1. Again, a little bit hidden, not perfect, but depending on your tolerance for weaving in ends, may be preferable. So now we are going to work our, just double checking our instructions here. We've main color, chain 1, Then it says with main color to work 3 double crochets in that next chain 1 space. Oops, want to make sure to bring that green along with us. Again, if I just go to crochet over it, it's going to be kind of messy up there. So let's sort of pull it up over our strand we're working with a little bit so we can take it with us. And then crochet over it. Did that hide it pretty well? Not great. So let's try a different tack. It really is just kind of trial and error. I'm going to pull back out that chain 1. And this time I'm going to make sure that it goes up over that yarn before I do that chain, excuse me, that one is right there. I'm going to chain 1 with it. I'm going to see how I can get this to hide really well. Maybe if I pull it back over the yellow here and then chain 1, or excuse me, yarn over, so that it's trapped in there. And then pull our end down and make our double crochet, and let's see what it looks like. That's better. Like I say, I find that really it's just a matter of kind of experimenting with each section and finding what's going to hide the yarn best. You're just kind of twisting it together, trying to hide it behind the stitches themselves. Or you can cut your yarn. This is a scrap-ghan, so you could even do this contrast color in lots of little bits of yarn and make it really, really interesting. Just do the hearts all in a solid color, or maybe break those up a little bit. It's up to you. So now we have worked that 3 double crochets into that chain 1 space there. So I'm going to come back here and make sure. Then we chain 1 and we work our corner again in this color. Now the contrast color is already here at the bottom, so we can just lay it right across the tops of these stitches as we come to the corner and crochet over them. So we've got that green trapped there, but it's our standard corner again. We're back in our main color still. So you can see now it's just going to lay over the top of those stitches back there. So if you want a really, really reversible blanket, you will need to cut your yarn with each color change, but since it's a scrap-ghan, you can carry it along the back if you prefer. So we've got our first 3 double crochets. I need to chain 3, 2, 3, and then 3 more back in that corner. 1. Oop, you can see my ends are kind of all they're getting wound up a little bit. We're almost all the way around, so I'm not going to bother untangling them again. I'm just going to pull them back a little bit here. Want to make sure to keep the green sort of in back of those stitches. They're all hidden away under all these double crochets. So there's 1, and we need 1 more. But I think, did it say to change colors? Let's find out while we still have 2 loops left on our hook. We are back in our main color, so I can go to the section that's not underlined. Again, this was the best thing I did when I was prepping for this pattern. So we worked our corner, 3 double crochets, chain 3, 3 double crochets in that chain 3 space, changing to A in that last double crochet. So yes, we want to stop with 2 loops left on the hook, bring up that green, yarn over, and finish that stitch. Let's see, if we pull down on all our ends here, is that one pretty well hidden? That one's not so bad. Let's see if we can just leave that one right there. Go back to our instructions. So now that we've changed colors, we chain 1 and then work 3 double crochets in the chain 1 space right there. So we chain 1 with our green, and then we have 3 double crochets to work in that chain 1 space. Now, the yellow is about the middle of that stitch. So again, we want to go back, flip that yellow up over the green, then make the chain 1. It's going to trap it up at the top of the stitch a little bit. Now we can flip it over the green again, yarn over with the green, and we come down to crochet in this stitch. Just bring that yellow with us and crochet right over it. Trap it right in that stitch. Let's see, did that work? That one worked really well. That's really well hidden. So 2 more green ones in there. Now it's at the bottom of the stitch. I can just crochet right over it. Hold on, twists. We're almost done. We really are almost done with our colors here. So, oops, I yarned over with the wrong one. Let's try that again. Yarn over with our green. Go back in that chain 1 space. There's our second double crochet and our third double crochet. And we chain 1. and join to the top of the chain 3 right there. 1, 2, 3. Now, at this point, there we are. At this point, we are actually all done with our main color. So if you wanted to, you could cut it back here and not have to carry it along this last little section. But I thought it would be a good idea to go ahead and show that color change just a couple more times. But like I said, we are done with our main color. You can see right there, it says break MC. That means break our main color. So we're going to pull out our scissors, and whatever the color of your heart was, it's time to go ahead and cut that yarn. I'm going to leave a few inches, of course, so that we can weave in those ends when we're done. And then I will set the yellow one aside. And now all those twists, no worries. We'll just go ahead and weave in that end when we're all finished. So now that is what your heart should look like at the end of round 3. You can see there were 3 sections of color changes there. And if you take the time to read through your pattern, believe me, I know. We still like making a gauge swatch, right? Reading through all this stuff before you're doing it. But for this section, when you've got a long paragraph like this and you've got color changes, it really is worth it. I can see at a glance where those 3 color changes were as I glance back and forth for my instructions to my work. And even then, it's important to take your time and go step by step. But now we can continue on with just the green or whatever color you want the outside of your square to be. So for round 4, with our A color, we're going to start again with a chain 3. 1, 2, 3. And this is going to be our first double crochet of this round. And then we're going to work a double crochet in each of the next 2 double crochets. So there's 1, and then 1 in the next double crochet. That brings us to our chain 3 corner. And now in the chain 3 corner, going to be doing it a little differently. We're going to work 5 double crochets all into that chain 3 space. Again, we don't have to try and go into the individual chains. We're just going to go right in that space beneath the chain 3. So there's 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. Pull up a little bit more yarn. Too much tension coming from my skein there. There we go. 4 and 5. All right. So you can see I put 5 double crochets into that corner. That's brought us all the way around. So now we can keep going. And the rest of round 4 is pretty simple. It can be summed up as double crochet in each stitch, 1 double crochet in each chain 1 space, and then 5 double crochets at the corner. So let's go ahead and make some of these together here. Double crochet in each stitch. So when you come to a double crochet, just put a double crochet in it. So there's our third one of that group of 3. That brings us to a chain 1. So we're going to double crochet right into that chain 1 space. Just 1 this time, not 3. There we are. Then we're back to stitches. So we put a double crochet in each stitch. I should say in each double crochet. A chain 1 is still a stitch, but we tend to kind of shorthand it like that after a while, don't we? Now here you can see this is where we had a color change. We're just going to put a chain 1, or excuse me, a double crochet in that chain 1 space. And you can see that covers up the messiness there in that chain 1 pretty well. Our tail's kind of trying to get in the way there, but you can see if I hold that out of the way, the color change is pretty well hidden there. So then we can just go back to double crocheting in each double crochet. So 1 and 2, 3, always in those groups of 3 there. And that brings us back to another corner. So I need to pull up some more yarn. There's our chain 3 corners. We put 5 double crochets right in there. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5. I'm going to go ahead and finish this square, even though I'm sure you can all see from here how it goes, right? We're going to get a really nice border on here. My hope is we can get this done, and before the weather hits today. I am in Iowa, so it is starting up. I can hear it starting to rumble out there. We will hopefully get to a little bit of the joining of these squares together because it has a really neat join for this Afghan that I did want to be able to demonstrate. Here we come to another one of those sections of big color change. We put that chain 1 or excuse me, that double crochet in the chain one space. There we go. You can see that helps hide that a little bit as well. Does have a little bit of the bleed through of the colors, so you have the option of cutting the yarn if you prefer. There we are. So double crochet in each double crochet in each chain one space. Coming up on our third corner here. So you can see these squares come together pretty quickly. They'd be absolutely wonderful for any of your scraps of Red Heart Super Saver. You can mix in any of your leftover Red Heart with Love would also be wonderful. If you do decide to join in on this crochet along, or well, it's not really a crochet along, but the scrap-ghan, the Red Heart Come On Get Scrappy, they do ask that you share your progress using hashtag Come On Get Scrappy and tagging Red Heart Yarns on social media. So we've got 2 there, 3, 4, and 5. Pull up some more yarn. Got less than 2 sides here left to go. So double crochet in each stitch. Yarnspirations is in the chat right now letting you guys know there are some fantastic scrap patterns on Yarnspirations. I know we linked to a fabulous collection of those in the description as well. But yeah, if you've got your leftover bits of yarn, projects like this are so fabulous. I mentioned at the beginning, this pattern calls for 120 of these squares total. Of course, that's to make the size they made. The great thing about patterns like this that are made up of motifs that are joined together afterwards is that, of course, you can make them as big or as small as you like. It just depends on how many squares you've made. You could easily make this a baby blanket, a lap blanket, all the way up to, you know, a king-sized blanket for your bed if you wanted to make that many squares. Or I've seen those big couch blankets at the big box stores lately that seem to be really in fashion. Hard to imagine how many squares those would take, but I'm sure you could do it if you had enough yarn. So we're at our corner again. So we've got 3, 4, and 5. I almost did the chain 3 thing, just out of habit. Good thing that crochet's so easy to fix compared to some other crafts, right? All we have to do is pull out our stitches when we make a mistake, not, you know, get a new canvas. We're down here to our last side, so we're just going to keep doing that same thing. Double crochet in each double crochet in each chain 1 space. I did see a picture someone shared with me earlier today on Facebook where they had made this pattern and they continued the granny square pattern for another round and just added a little bit more of the yellow in a couple places, or again, whatever your interior heart color would be. They weren't using yellow and green either. But it gave a really neat look too. So it's definitely something you could play with. It is a really just great variation here on basically the standard granny square. With some simple color changes, you really get that look of a heart. Now, the final stitch for this round is going to be a double crochet in that final chain 1 space. So we have that right there. And then we are finally done. Now, the pattern calls, as most patterns do, for you to join with a slip stitch to the top of that chain 3. I'm going to give it a little bit of a nicer join today, since we've got our live class going here. I'm going to go ahead and cut the end again. I want to leave several inches for weaving it in. But as part of that, I'm going to do the join as part of the weaving in. So I'm going to grab a yarn needle here, something with a nice big eye to it. And then rather than yarning over and pulling a loop through or slip stitching, I'm just going to pull up on my crochet hook and pull the end right out the top of that stitch. Then we'll get the yarn here on the needle. And then I'm going to do what I like to call seamless finishing or a seamless join. Now, when you're making motifs that you're going to join together later, you want to make sure that you have the correct number of stitches on each side so you can join those squares together. Otherwise, if it's something like a crochet along or you've got different motifs with different stitch counts, you'll want to use a loose joining system that gives you a little bit of play. Maybe you skip some stitches, you can skip fewer or less, but this join is going to be stitch for stitch. So we want to make sure to maintain our stitch count. So to do that, if I were to just slip stitch to that first chain 3, The slip stitch would be very easy to mistake for another stitch, right? I think we've all made that mistake as we were learning to crochet, and occasionally still, right? We are instead going to join with our yarn needle to maintain our stitch count as we join our squares together and just give it a little bit neater look. So I'm going to take my needle. You can see that yarn is coming out of the center. Let me get it pulled aside here of that last stitch we made, the center of that V. So I'm going to take my yarn needle and I'm going to come not to that chain 3, but to the next stitch, the first real double crochet that we made, if you will. Then I'll put my yarn needle just under those top 2 loops from the front, just like I would with a crochet hook, and then just pull that yarn right on through. Now I'm going to keep pulling. I'm not going to pull it tight. I'm going to pull it till it's about right there between the stitches, about the size of a stitch. That looks pretty good. So now I'm going to take that yarn needle and go right back down into the center of that last stitch I made, just where that yarn's coming out. And send that yarn right down there. And now give it a little wiggle and a little pull and a little adjustment there. And from the top, that right there is the stitch I just sewed. It looks exactly like all the other V's. And it's resting above that chain 3. So that would be essentially used now as the top of that chain 3. So from there, we can just take that end and weave it in as we normally would. So I think that just makes a little bit of a nicer join there on our squares. So from there, you would want to go ahead and weave in your ends and make, 50, 100, 200, however many more motifs that you want to make for your blanket. And then when you've got them made, it's time to join them all together. So luckily, I have a square I already made last night, and there are specific instructions for joining this. Now, as I mentioned before, there are lots of different joining methods out there. So if you've got a different favorite joining method for joining your motifs, go for it. This is your project. You should absolutely make it look the way you want it to look. However, they recommend, and what's shown in the photographs here, is joining with a flat slip stitch join, which is really fun. Now, you can see here in the original, there's a little bit of texture here with this join, and they did it in the white, so it just kind of disappears. And that's really the way you want to do this. Some people like to do it in a contrast color to get a different effect. I am going to do it today back in the yellow rather than in the green, just so it's a little bit easier for everybody to see what I'm doing. But if you wanted a little bit more hidden, absolutely you'd want to do it in whatever your contrast color is, your second color. So I'm going to pull up some more of the yellow here. And then let's look at our squares here. We want to make sure when we're joining our squares, we both have them facing the same direction and they're both right side up. So if you've carried your stitches along, that'll be pretty easy to see which side's the wrong side, and which side is the right side. Want to make sure they're facing the same direction. Then what we're going to be doing is we're going to be working through the back loops only. So let me pull up one of these really close right here. You can see here I'm on the right side of the fabric. And at the top of every stitch, there are 2 loops. We were just talking about that V while we made that seamless join. The loop that's closest to you, right there, the one I've put my hook under, that is the front loop. The one that is furthest away is the back loop. It's always relative to us, the crocheter. In this pattern, we're only working from the right side of our fabric. We're not, turning our work at any point. But if we turned our work, then this would be the front and that would be the back. It's always just relative to the person who's crocheting. And when we work under the front loop, we go just under that front loop. And when we go under the back loop, we don't want to reverse and come from behind unless, we've got some wacky instructions that tell us to. It is crochet after all. Generally speaking, when we go under that back loop, we go into the middle of the stitch and then just go under that back loop. So for this joining, we're going to be working in just the back loops of these stitches. So for these instructions, they tell us to work through the back loops only, keep the working yarn on the wrong side of the work, and then to join it into 12 horizontal strips, and then join those strips together. So let's go ahead and just join this seam right here. Want to find the end of our yarn, pull up, like I say, a couple yards here, have it nice and loose, and then you just need to pick which end you want to start at. I'm going to go ahead and start at this end right here. Actually, let's start at the bottom and work our way up. Doesn't really matter which direction you go. It's just personal preference. So what I want to do, and there's a little bit of a diagram right here that shows it. We want to go and find our matching stitches. So always a little bit of prep when it comes to seaming. Let's go ahead and do this. I'm going to find that third or center double crochet at the bottom there. And now I want to do the same thing on this side. I want to make sure that I start in the same stitch for each. So that'll be our little visual clue there. Then we've got our yarn ready. I'm going to insert my hook, get the hook stitch mark out of the way, mark that stitch with my nail, insert my hook just under that back loop, and then pull up this stitch, sort of use my finger to mark that stitch, pull the stitch marker out of the way, and go under just that back loop, okay? So you can see it looks a little wacky right now, but we've gone under just the back loop of each of those stitches. Now we grab our yarn. We're going to lay our yarn over our hook, just like when we joined it before, and pull through both of those loops. It's really helpful to have a little table or something like that to rest in front of you. Now, we'll weave that end in. Where'd the end go? There it is. We'll weave this end in when we're all done. But for right now, we can just let it hang out in back there. So now we come to the next stitch. I'm going to try and hold it out of the way here. This is the next stitch on the first one we went through, so we want to go back to that one. And again, we want to go under the back loop only. Right there. So under that back loop only, come back to the other one, find the next stitch right there, go under that back loop only, right there. Then we find the end still attached to the skein, yarn over, pull that loop through, pull that loop through the other square, and then finally through the other stitch there. Now, I'm doing this really slowly to show it, and it will be a little slow at first, but it'll speed up as you go. Let's find the next stitch right there, go under that back loop only, go to the other square, go under that back loop only, find our yarn again, make sure we get the end attached to the skein. I have a bad habit of grabbing the other end, can you tell? Yarn over, pull that loop through both of those squares. Oops, if you drop it, it's okay. We'll just go back in there and grab it. Pull through that square, pull through the other square, and then up through that stitch. And you can see, hopefully, we've made a couple here, how it just creates a really flat seam there in between the two. So let's do a few more. Find that end of our skein again. Want to remember, always go in the same order. If you want to do the left first, if you're left-handed especially, that might be a little bit easier, but we just want to make sure to always go in the same order. So first the one on the right for me, then the one on the left, yarn over, pull through the squares, and right up through that slip stitch. Now you can see that first one's going to open up and be a little crazy and loose, but that's okay. We can just give that a little tug, and that'll pull right back down. If you find that this is giving you trouble as you're making these stitches, you can go ahead and take the time to weave this in, or even just kind of use your yarn needle to tie it into a little bow or something. You could put a little slip knot in it right here to kind of hold it so it can't pull through. Whatever works for you to help keep that secured, because I know those first few stitches can be a little wobbly for sure. So let's do a few more here. We want to find, this is the one we just connected, so we find the very next stitch. Just go under that back loop. Find the same thing on the next square. Go under that back loop, yarn over, and pull through all the loops on the hook. There we go. The square on the right, then the square on the left, yarn over, and just pull through all three. And you can see that makes a really, really lovely join. So the easiest way, if you, again, want to avoid having extra ends to weave in, is you would want to have a bunch of these made at once, and then you could go all the way up and then come back across, or you could do just one little section at a time if that's what you're more comfortable with. Again, it's totally your blanket. You can do whichever direction you want to go first, whether that's horizontal or vertical. If you want it to look exactly like the written instructions, I think they tell you to go horizontally first. But, you know, in the end, it's whatever you like best. There we go. And what's most convenient for you. So we'll take a few more of these stitches here. There we are. Yarn over again. Now you can imagine if we had made this in the green instead of the yellow, as the instructions say to do, that would be a really well hidden seam. Again, I'm doing it in the yellow right now to highlight it, to make it a little bit easier for everyone to see. But if you like the look of the yellow, sort of the contrast, if you will, doesn't have to be yellow, whatever color you're using. You can see as we go closer here, these are really starting to pull together. But if you like using the contrast color, if you like that look, you like that highlight, sort of the lines in between the squares, then do it in a contrast color. It's a scrap-ghan. You could bring in a whole new color. You know, we talked a little bit earlier about how the classic granny square is what you see in so many TV shows and things. And, you know, think about those blankets. Those are usually just a riot of color. There's quite often no rhyme or reason to those. And those are the ones that make us feel homey and make us, you know, have that familiar feeling the most. So definitely a great pattern for any sort of scrap-ghan. You could get that look with a little extra touch of some hearts here. So we're just continuing that seam all the way up. Let's see, I do see a comment said I only do the seamless join. Since I learned it, it's great unless you want to find the join. Absolutely. I tell you what, that's another point where I tend to pull up my stitch markers. If I find I'm going to need, if I know I'm going to need to find that join again, I will go ahead and put a stitch marker in it. Let's see. Oh, got a little bit of a yarn split on that one, so I'm going to pull that one right back out. If you find that happens every once in a while, especially with a sharper hook, we want to just give that stitch a little tug back and forth, and that usually straightens right back out. So in one and then in the other. So you can see with this type of join why it's so important to have that same stitch count for all these squares. This is a join that definitely depends on the stitch count being the same on each side. If we had different numbers of stitches on the different sides of our square, this join probably wouldn't be the join we wanted to use. But there are lots of other joins out there that you can explore as well. Even if you just wanted to mix it up and have a little bit lacier look, you could absolutely use one of those with these squares as well. Going to pull that through. There we go. Those didn't want to go. You can see we're just taking our time, working our way up. We're almost at that second corner. Again, you want to make sure to work to that third stitch in the corner there so that we go all the way to the corner. We don't end up accidentally skipping any of those and having little gaps in our afghan. But we're almost there. I think that's the first one of the corner. And then second one of the corner. You can see here as we get going and it's a little more solidified how much easier it is to just go in there, grab those loops and pull it on through. And now we want to come back and look. Here's that corner again. There's those 5 double crochets. So that one, the middle one, is going to be our corner, if you will. The corner of the corner. So that's where we want to finish off this seam right here. And then, of course, we could join 2 more squares together right here if we wanted to, or go ahead and finish off if we want to do just 2 squares at a time. Again, totally up to you. I'm going to go ahead, obviously, and just finish this one off and pull that end on through and secure it. And there we go. So that's how you can join those together. Now, we are unfortunately out of time, and I don't know if you guys can hear it, but the thunder is rolling in. So I am going to go ahead and finish up here. But I did want to point out there is also a really lovely edging pattern for this pattern, if you will. But you could use that if you want to. You can see here, it really looks like a nice solid bit in the original color. Whatever your heart color is, it would be a really nice emphasis on that. It seems to be pretty much single crochets and double crochets, so that should be pretty easy. But again, it's your project. You can add whatever edging you want to it, mix it up, add something, you know, fancier or even simpler if you like, whatever edging makes you happy. So we'll go ahead and come back to the other camera. There we go. And I want to thank you all so much for joining me today. I hope you've enjoyed this class. Again, free on the Yarnspirations YouTube channel. If you did, definitely let us know. Be sure to hit that thumbs up so we can have lots more of them. And I hope you all have a wonderful, safe, happy, and healthy day. I'll talk to you all again soon. Bye, everybody.